in the headlines, out of office, a recall vote has ousted Portsmouth's embattled mayor James Holley. This is what matters. Good evening, I'm Cathy Lewis. Dr. James Holley started the week as mayor of Portsmouth, but he ended it with a dubious distinction. He may be the only elected official in U.S. history to be recalled twice. That's just one of the issues we're considering tonight with our editorial panel. We'll talk about what happened in Portsmouth. We'll also consider Northrop Grumman's prospective spinoff of Newport News Shipbuilding. We'll get Kimball Payne's take on politics, and we'll take a look at the increasing interest in privatizing liquor stores. Joining us this week to consider the issues, of course, Kimball Payne, political reporter with the Daily Press, and we're also glad to have with us the Virginian-Pilot's editorial page editor, Don Luzzatto. Again with us is Kim Lenz, who's going to explain to us why iPads are the order of the day in Williamsburg. She's the editor of the Williamsburg-Yorktown Daily. And joining us for the first time, delighted to have reporter Peter Frost, also with the Daily Press. And Peter, I understand you sit just a couple of cubes down from our friend Kimball Payne here. Is this true?
That's right. That's right. I can throw pencils and hit them very easily.
I see. And how is that? How does that work out? I mean, I imagine he's a pretty entertaining fellow in the pool there.
Well, it's the interesting part of the office, no doubt about that.
Well, we're glad you're with us tonight. Thank you for being here. Of course, the big story of the week, Don Luzzatto, the recall of Portsmouth Mayor James Holley. Boy, I tell you, sad end, don't you think?
A sad culmination. I think there's no mistaking, though, the will of the Portsmouth voters. I mean, you had more people turn out for this than for the municipal elections.
26%
in May.
Huge turnout.
It was a huge turnout, and the margin was overwhelming. It's just sad to see. Mr. Holley had ample opportunity to withdraw gracefully at a number of points over the last year and just chose not to do it.
Yeah. Well, you got some sound of from the election itself and from what Mayor Holley had to say about the outcome.
He promoted the city and he called it his family, and I'd been to meetings where he talked, and he did very nice talking, but recently he's not making much sense when he talks. So I really don't think that he's ready to keep going on as the mayor.
I don't know. I'm trying to figure out, is it a racial issue or what is it? Why do they want him out of the seat right now? It's a whole lot of old folks down there it's a whole lot of old folks downtown in City Hall and everywhere else, and they don't get them out.
Senator Byrd was 92, all right? I don't know if anybody scrutinized how, capable he was, but, there are others who seemingly served their time or whatever. But I do believe that Mayor James W. Holley is still viable, and he has my prayers.
Holley, I know that he was a great man in his younger days, but he's lost it. He really has. I think he's probably on the verge of being senile. And I think with times like they are, we need somebody who's going to actually do the job.
He's asking people to do things that, you won't even ask your own wife to do.
Well, he's utilizing taxpayers' money. That's the main thing that bothers me, for personal things, I feel. So
I think a lot of people forget where this city was 20 years ago and where it is now, and the changes that have been made. And, through that time, the one real mainstay has been Dr. Holley. So I think a lot of people forget that, and they're voting on a motion right now.
Been there for over 20 years. What difference for a year and a half been? What difference would it have been?
Let him serve his term, essentially.
Serve that year and one half, and don't vote for him anymore. Let him serve that.
The voices of some voters, compliments of the good folks of the Virginian-Pilot. We appreciate them taking their cameras to the street to get those comments. Of course, Mayor Holley was informed of the result on election night.
We are sincerely appreciative of your effort to come here and make this evening a memorable one. What you and I started 30 years ago, well, we're not through yet. This was just another distraction, another movement in another direction, but Portsmouth will still have the imprint of what we have put in this effort to make this a quality place for citizens in the Portsmouth family. So we take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you. Well, actually, I was just a candidate. I didn't do any of the hard work you did. So each and every one of you, I know you have some disappointment. Well, that goes in the political process. You win some elections and you lose some. You have to be prepared for that, and you have to understand, well, there are reasons why you win and why you lose. All of those processes will be certainly recognized by each and every one of you, and you will be able to come together at some other time and enjoy some successes in this process. Don't say it isn't no good and I don't want to be involved. You have to be involved. It is your part of the democratic process that you fulfill the responsibility to improve the quality of life for the family, in this instance the Portsmouth family, which is full of hopes and dreams and aspirations. So the effort that you put forth at this time, listen, will not be discounted. It was very critically important that you were there in the direction that you thought was in the best interest of the full life of the capitalism. We want to thank each and every one.
That was now former Mayor James Holley. Compliments of Brian Clark at the Virginian-Pilot. Don, really interesting when you look at the comments from the voters. You can't help but notice that some of those comments were pretty split along racial lines. One person even said, I think this is a racial deal. That's one of the unfortunate, I think, outcomes of this whole situation. And it's interesting to think about how the city goes about dealing with that issue moving forward.
And I think to us as an editorial board, this was always about what had happened, the incidents with his assistant. And I think that the troubling to all of us was this tendency, especially in the latter weeks of the campaign, to make this really about the race of the mayor and the race of the people who wanted him out. And I think, that needs to be something addressed by whoever is selected as the next mayor. That needs to be priority one, is to make it clear that Portsmouth is one city, regardless of your race.
And of course, the next step on this is the selection of a new mayor, which at this taping is not yet complete. So we will see where that goes.
What's more telling than the racial makeup of the comments, I thought, was the sadness on both sides, because
enormously sad.
Normally when you see an election, I mean, there's a victory party. There's one side is overjoyed, and there was no joy in anyone coming out for this election. So there's an opportunity to kind of harness that and say, all right, let's get Portsmouth back. I mean, I think that's a good sign.
I think the other thing we noted, we talked about this week on our radio broadcast. We had a lot of people who called and said, look, this is a beautiful, gorgeous city that is making great strides. And so I think, to underline what you're saying, there's that idea that you have that moving forward. But what was also interesting, and we'll hear this a little bit later in tonight's broadcast, was the calls from people who said exactly what you're saying. One fellow says, look, I take no pride in this. I believe he needs to go, but it is a sad, sad day.
I think it's important to note that on the same day of the election, TCC celebrated its new campus in Portsmouth on Victory Boulevard, and that is it's a major step forward, both in that section of the city and in the city as a whole. And I think that's worth noting. And
I tell you, if you think about the idea of a picture being worth 1,000 words, the picture on the front page of your nuppaper the day after that, with Mayor Holley standing there with his son on one side and a daughter on the other, it just that picture just there it is. It just sort of says everything I think you need to know about that. So we'll see where the city of Portsmouth goes from here. Big news on the peninsula about the prospective spin-off of the Shipyard, the Newport News Shipyard. What is going on there? Was that an anticipated development?
Well, there was a lot of chatter in the market since Wes Bush took over as CEO in January that he could seek to divest the company from its shipbuilding unit, which hasn't performed quite as well as the company would like it in terms of profit margins. But personally, it caught me by surprise that it came this quickly and that it included the Newport News Shipyard.
So what would be the goal of a divestiture of the nature that we're talking about, spinning it off? What does that mean, and what's the goal?
Well, what the goal is for Northrop Grumman is it lets them focus on what they view as their core businesses, which would be aerospace, information systems, and other parts of their business. They sort of backed into shipbuilding, and it just hasn't been profitable for them. So in a spin-off situation, they would no longer have to worry about shipbuilding. They could focus more on their core activities. And
of course, we should note this push me, pull you has been going on for a while, because the shipyard used to be owned by another corporate giant. Then it was sort of spun off on an independent basis. Then Northrop Grumman picked it up, and now who knows what happens next. It seems like a bit of the history that goes on here.
I've been living here for 16 years, and that's all happened in the time that I've been living here. So, so I'm very familiar with this 100-plus-year-old shipyard. And
so what do you
think?
Just how much it's changed?
Well, that's what you heard from workers.
Right.
Workers said, I don't care what's on the banner. I mean, I'm still going to get a paycheck and still work hours. I mean, we had one of our former shipyard reporters went out and just started talking with the steel workers, and they're like, all right, this happened, what, 4 times in the past 20 years? I mean, obviously, there's a level of uncertainty in a sale, and but you heard the same thing from Governor McDonnell. He said, I'm convinced that the customer's still going to be there. From Rob Whitman, I'm convinced the customer's still going to be there. I mean,
you talk to basically anyone, whether it's the shipyard worker, elected officials, defense analysts. They're not concerned about what's going on at the Newport News Shipyard. It may have a different name on the letterhead next year at this time, but they're going to still continue to produce aircraft carriers and nuclear-powered submarines for the Navy. The Navy's not going anywhere. There's no other yard that's capable of doing this. So I think that should bring some sort of satisfaction and maybe, reduce the amount of panic right now.
But do you remember when they scrubbed off Northrop Grumman off the gantry crane? Does anybody remember that when it first happened? And there was this gasp. Like the peninsula, the bottom part of the peninsula had just fallen into, Hampton Roads, and it was over.
Yeah.
But, that didn't happen, and I hope people are mindful of that, as this sort of moves along and shakes out.
And maybe the fact that it has happened so many times, just in the recent history of that place, will help people understand that, as you say, people are still going to work and the customer is still there.
But it's the sheer size of it. It's 20,000 people, and that's just direct employees, and their economic impact on the region is enormous. We all have friends who work there.
Yeah, no kidding.
And, so panic is probably not what I would expect, but I would expect some concern, like anybody else's.
And this is a different economic time than the times before when we were in this circumstance. So what do you hear, and what chatter do you hear, Peter, about what the next step on this is?
Well, the company itself has said that it would prefer to spin off the shipbuilding unit as opposed to selling it. And that's basically because, what analysts are saying is, who's going to buy it? I mean, the buyer would have to have extremely deep pockets. It would have to have the ability to take on an enormous amount of debt. I mean, they're saying it could fetch anywhere between $3 and $5 billion. So the company, realizing that, is saying, well, our only option may be spinning it off. And when you look at the potential buyers, you've got companies like General Dynamics, which is the nation's #2 shipbuilder behind Northrop. But their monopoly concerns there, that's not likely to be approved by the government. And you've got a couple other defense contractors that may or may not play, but it's not a good time to get into this business. I mean, the Navy's portfolio is shrinking. I mean, Newport News is in great shape. The Gulf Coast is struggling. And the future there is far more uncertain than it is in Newport
and that's
News.
A bound-up deal, too, with the Gulf Coast operations, right?
That's right. Northrop just announced yesterday that they do view it as one unit. Since they combined them in ship systems in the Gulf Coast and Newport News Shipbuilding in 2008, their goal was to combine it, and they view it as one asset.
Boy, and Don, you're so right about the tentacles of this thing, because you've got, not the tentacles, but the tentacles. This is an employer that just has these tentacles that go throughout the community with ancillary businesses. Certainly the employees themselves, lots of them live throughout the region. I mean, they really are. It really is an employer that touches every city in the region. Certainly lots of folks living in Williamsburg connected to the shipyard as well.
There are. We hear about it all the time, and just a little uncertainty because everybody up in Williamsburg thinks that tourism is the main industry,
Right.
But people are in the healthcare system. They're working for the shipyard. And they're concerned about anything that would be shaky. But I think, the gentleman who Peter Dujardin talked to, in the story in the Daily Press. I think he nailed it. The worker there, the hourly worker, or is just unconcerned.
But the reason you have concern is because of things like the Ford plant.
Well, sure.
I mean, you've had so many hits, and obviously,
and the paper,
the shipyard is
the
shipyard is a completely different animal. But you see these things where people thought, good jobs, good benefits. This is never going anywhere. The Ford F-150 is going to keep coming off the line, and
it is just somewhere else, right? Yeah.
Right.
Well, you're right. There is a difference, and it's a big difference because the Navy has committed to building these aircraft carriers over a long period of time. The Ford class, exactly. They may have pushed it from 4-year centers to 5-year centers, but they're going to still build them.
And 2 subs a year.
That's right, and 2 subs a year. They're ramping up. They're going to be hiring 1,000 people.
And you can't do this anywhere else. I mean,
the
capital investment to do this any place else in America would just be prohibitive.
They just put $50 million into the apprentice school to start cranking things. I mean, it's not like there's no capital investment.
This is going to be here. This is going to be here.
And we'll see what shape it takes moving forward. Kimball Payne, bring us up to date on what's going on in the world of politics. I see very interesting developments around privatizing liquor stores and some other interesting developments on the scene.
Well, privatizing liquor stores, I mean, Bob McDonnell's made no bones about that, and that one's going to be an interesting push because, I mean, that's kind of the central issue of his reform effort, and he's got these town halls running right now. We had one in Newport News this past week. We'll have another one in Virginia Beach on Monday. And they're trying to gather ideas how to streamline state government, how to do things better, smarter. But ABC stores is kind of his primary target, and that's the idea makes sense. But at the same time, when you've got a tight budget, when you've got someone who had to slash $2 billion out of the budget, I mean, this is something that brings in $100 million in profit a year. So the lawmakers are very wary about getting rid of that, and not saying, we're going to have to turn around and cut.
Wasn't the goal of that sale transportation, as the same way that the goal of offshore drilling was supposed to be transportation?
McDonnell's thinking that he can get $500 million up front for the leasing rights to somewhere between the neighborhood of 330 to 350 liquor stores in the state. But the question is, do you pay, all right, we get $500 up front and then we lose $100 million every year? I mean, return on investment, 5 years you're out of it. So do you have a leasing agreement? Is there a way to turn that revenue around? Obviously, you'd still get the taxes on liquor, but now you've got groups, what is it, Walmart, Kroger, Food Lion, who've formed a group that they want to push for privatization, obviously because they want to be able to make all kinds of profit selling liquor in their stores. So the question is, are you going to make up for it by selling more liquor in Virginia? I mean, that seems to be like the only way the equation works is if there's more liquor sold. But, I mean, liquor doesn't make sense as a state business, but that $100 million is a big deal in a state budget.
And it's interesting, too, when you look at the kind of budget situation we've been in, he's really in a pretty cash-strapped situation, even though we ended the year with a little bit more of a surplus, I suspect, than we really thought we were going to.
$220 million. I mean, it's interesting because you're right. Virginia does not belong in this business, but it's in this business. And we are the owners of this business by extension. So you want to make sure that whatever we do, it's the best possible deal. And that may take some time to figure out.
All these things are interesting when you run the numbers on them. Kim Lenz, when I saw in your very fine publication, Williamsburg-Yorktown Daily, this news about the city council using iPads, my first thought was, are you kidding me? I want one so badly I can taste it. I can't afford it. Right, my little and they're buying them for everybody on the council.
I think it's probably because there's a recent William and Mary graduate now on the city council.
Indeed, so
young guy. He understands the technology. Maybe Scott Foster can school the rest of them.
There you go.
They just want to save on paper and toner.
Well, the numbers are amazing, though.
And you understand that, but. Have you worked on an iPod
or
an iPad?
No.
It's different. It's a different experience.
So it's $614 or something like that for the iPad
for the 5 council members.
For the 5 council members, so you're thinking, yikes, that's a lot of money. But then when you look at the amount of money they're spending to print,
in a year and a half, it's considered paid for. So it's a wash. So
are they able to use them pretty easily? I mean,
well, they just got them. I mean, they just approved buying them for themselves. So I don't know if they're in line at the Apple Store or something, but. But
they signed up for those appointments.
Correct. With the genius.
Council.
That's true.
I sort of question some of the assumptions behind the numbers as to how much they're going to save and that they're going to pay for themselves in a year and a half. Well, I don't know what they assume their printing costs are, but I mean, CNET, which is an online news website, says it costs 3 cents to print a page, and you wonder. are you really printing that much so it's going to pay for itself in a year and a half? Further, you can buy a netbook, which isn't as fancy or as special as the iPad is, for $300.
But you can't take notes on a netbook, and they're smaller. And you know, they talked about all of this, and you know, it's not just a guess in Williamsburg. When they do the math, they do the math. You know, they say we went through this many gallons of toner and this many reams of paper.
I say that in order to absolutely observe this and to verify it, we all need to have iPads. I think that's the only solution to this problem.
I was going to ask whether they're going to buy iPads for everybody who wants a copy of the book.
Is there one beneath my seat?
That's right. Yes, you've got the special one today. You're taking the flowers home.
That would be
By the way, this is we taped this program a little bit before Friday night, and we should let you know that AP just broke the news that oil has stopped gushing into Gulf waters for the first time since April. So that is fantastic news indeed, and so we'll see. That just has to make you feel better. But interesting implications, though, in terms of offshore drilling in Virginia. That I suspect that's not going to be something that will automatically encourage folks to lift that moratorium.
Listen, the governor was down here. He had an Ask the Governor bit on local radio earlier this week, and he said, "I understand the caution. I understand we need to, you know, maybe pump the brakes a little bit. I just don't understand." Full stop. The question is, how does the public feel? I mean, because before the public sentiment for offshore drilling was pretty high. I venture to guess that polling is significantly lower than it was. I mean, you just look at the pictures, and it doesn't matter, you know, conservative, liberal. I mean, that's just, you know, it's clearly devastation. So, I mean, there's potential out there, but obviously I think it's going to be cold comfort that it finally got shut off.
Yeah, we'll see where that goes, because that, of course, was the great promise for transportation funding, too. Even though it was going to be years down the road, we should
years down the road, and I think there's no scheme in Washington to actually make sure the money comes to Virginia. I mean,
there is that, too.
Yeah, we have a really tiny piece of the ocean that drilling comes to Virginia. I mean, there are lots of practical problems with the idea.
And yet people in nuclear power say we messed up by putting a full stop on nuclear power after 3 Mile Island. So we'll see where we go. Thanks to all of you for being with us. Who's got the duty to order the iPads? Is that you, Kim? Okay, I'm just checking.
I'm on it. I'll take your credit card down.
There you go.
Or Peter can have the credit card.
Be back in a moment with a final thought. This week's recall of Portsmouth Mayor James Holley was a sad chapter upon which to end Mayor Holley's book of public service. The road to Tuesday's election was littered with very poor behavior. Mayor Holley asking his assistant to perform inappropriate tasks, racial remarks about the hotel development in the city. We talked about the recall this past Monday on our Hearsay Radio program a day before the vote. We are going to Sonia on the line from Portsmouth. Hi, Sonia. You're on the air.
I live in Portsmouth. It's beautiful. My son enjoys it. We ride our bikes. Norfolk at Waterside has a better view looking into Portsmouth because it's so beautiful than Portsmouth has a view looking at Waterside. So I see so many things happening, so many shops and stores and houses. What is it really?
But caller Sharon was frustrated by the politics of race. Sharon is on the line from Portsmouth. Hi, Sharon. You're on the air.
My husband and I have lived in Portsmouth for quite a while. We live in Old Town now. We have lived in Shea Terrace. When we got back to Portsmouth a few years ago, we saw how beautiful everything had gotten. Gee, Portsmouth is great. We moved downtown. But then I just started to feel recently that the mayor is not really supportive of the entire city of Portsmouth.
And William, too, was uncomfortable with the charge of racism. William's on the line also from Portsmouth. Hi, you're on the air.
Hi, Cathy. I'm African American, and I'm uncomfortable about the race thing. And I respect all the things that Mayor Holley has done for Portsmouth in terms of integration. Hugo Owens, who I knew you knew, a lot of black civil rights leaders in the area. I have a lot of respect for that. That has nothing to do with what he did with his assistant, though. And what I have a problem with as an African American that lives in the city is that some African American leaders in the city is making it a race thing. They're making it a race thing, which makes me uncomfortable.
And finally, Bill, a man who added a very personal dimension to the story. Bill is on the line now from Gloucester. Hi, Bill. You're on the air.
I've been a friend of Dr. Holley's for many years. He helped me get my medical career started. I'm a white doctor. One of the things I want to say is that there is not a racial bone in Dr. Holley's body. He's a wonderful man. But on the other hand, I also have a number of friends who are on the Portsmouth board, and we have been trying to talk with him for years as his mind is not what it used to be about stepping down. And it's a hard thing for me to say. On one hand, I love the man. On the other hand, I hate to say that having a conversation with him is not what it used to be. It is time for him to step down.
Now, to many observers, the big question was, why didn't the mayor just do that, step down and save his dignity? Well, it was his assistant, Michael Muhammad, who helped me understand that this week. Michael came on the show to apologize for the mayor, who had confirmed his appearance and failed to show. On the subject of why he didn't just step down, Michael recalled the mayor's trailblazing civil rights history. He said many people in Portsmouth had worked hard for the vote, and Mayor Holley, he wasn't going to be the one to take it away from them. If the vote was taken and Mayor Holley lost, he said, so be it. But he wanted everyone to have a voice in that decision instead of making the decision on his own. Well, the decision was made for him on Tuesday. Tonight, one can only hope that history's view of these final years dims and that what shines through is Mayor Holley's efforts to end segregation and his early and consistent and effective record of public service. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time for another look at what matters.